Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. My family has owned a 60-acre farm just outside of town for over 100 years. It's nothing fancy, just some fields, a small barn, and a little farmhouse. But it's been in our family for generations. My parents worked that land their whole lives and raised me and my siblings there. Some of my best childhood memories were helping my dad feed the chickens and riding on the tractor with my mom. When I got older, I moved away for college and a job in the city, but the farm was still dear to my heart. I'd visit often to help my aging parents with whatever needed to be done. We always talked about how one day I'd move back and take over the farm. Well, about 5 years ago, I finally made that move back home. My parents were getting too old for the day-to-day farm work, and my job in the city had me burnt out. Moving back to the farm felt right. My plan was to start small, just grow some crops to sell at the local farmers market until I got the hang of things. Then someday take over all the land and have a full working farm again. Things were going well until about a year ago when I got a knock on my door from a man named Philip. He introduced himself as the president of the Oak Hills Homeowners Association. I had heard of them. They were the neighborhood right outside the farm property. Upscale houses selling for way more than I could ever afford. Philip explained that the homeowners associations had plans to expand into my family's farmland. Since my property bordered their neighborhood, they wanted me to join the homeowners associations. That way, they could have jurisdiction over my land for their expansion plans. I politely declined his offer, explaining that this farm had been in my family for generations, and I had no intention of handing control over to an homeowners associations. Philip seemed annoyed but told me to think it over. A few weeks later, I got a letter from a lawyer representing the homeowners associations. It said if I didn't join in the next 30 days, they would find a way to acquire my family's land, whether I agreed or not. I tore up the letter, pissed that they thought they could intimidate me into giving up my family's legacy. Over the next few weeks, Philip and his homeowners association's cronies kept showing up at my door, repeatedly pressuring me to reconsider. They used every tactic imaginable: flattery, money offers, veiled threats. But I refused to budge. This was my family's land, and there was no way I would let some entitled homeowners associations take it from us. Things came to a head one Saturday morning when I was out fixing a fence in the south field. A line of bulldozers came rumbling up the dirt road alongside my property. Figuring it was some kind of homeowners association's intimidation tactic, I hopped in my truck and sped over to where they were halted at the property line. Philip stepped out of a Range Rover with a smug grin on his face. He announced that they were there to start grading the land in preparation for building the new phase of homeowners association's homes. I lost it on him, screaming that he had no right to invade my family's property. He laughed in my face and said it wasn't my land anymore. Fuming with anger, I jumped back in my truck and raced to my parents' house where I knew they kept all the property records. I grabbed the deed and any other documentation I could get my hands on. At the county clerk's office, I was able to get certified copies made, proving ownership of the land. Back at the farm, the bulldozers were rumbling across the south field, tearing up the fence I had just fixed. I drove straight at them, forcing the vehicles to stop. The drivers looked ready to fight me when Philip and his lawyer stepped out of the Range Rover. I shoved the property records in their faces, telling them to take their equipment and get the hell off my land. The lawyer took one look at the deed and ownership records and realized they were screwed. Philip's smug grin had vanished. He looked around anxiously as I told him I would be suing him personally and the entire homeowners associations for illegally trespassing and property damage. Within an hour, the bulldozers were retreating back up the dirt road. I spent the next several weeks repairing the torn-up fence line and meeting with my lawyer to build an airtight case against the homeowners associations. In the end, we settled out of court, but not before I made sure the homeowners associations paid dearly for trying to steal my family's legacy. With the lawsuit winnings, I was able to completely renovate the farmhouse and upgrade all the old equipment and facilities in preparation of taking over full operations someday. My parents were so proud of me for standing up to the homeowners association's bullies. This farm meant everything to our family, and I was willing to fight as hard as necessary to defend it. Philip got booted from the Homeowners Association's president position, and they completely scrapped the plans to expand. The farm has been nice and peaceful again. I can't say it was fun having to deal with entitled jerks trying to take our land, but the whole ordeal just made this place even more special to me. It reminded me that the memories and roots are much deeper than any shallow homeowners associations. This land has been in my family for generations, and that's never going to change. The next one is a pro-revenge story, so this happened about 1.5 years ago, but I recently heard the news on how far my revenge went. I was a Navy enlisted service member and was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan for a few years before I got transferred back stateside. I worked in the main hospital that cared for service members and their beneficiaries. It's a small hospital, so everyone knows everyone. Shortly after I left, I caught wind of a new physician officer working in the radiology department. My friends would say he's horrible to work with, but that's nothing new. However, someone saw him print a letter and he left it on his desk, and took a picture of it and sent it to me. He's requesting to move from enlisted housing to officer. Edit. Found out it's not a private letter. He did actually send it to housing, and most of housing is run by enlisted members. For context, military housing is available for those who are married, have a family, or are qualified based on their rank and depending on the military base itself. Typically, officer housing is much nicer than the enlisted. In Yokosuka, housing is basically the same all around because it's overseas. But most of the housing is apartments, and each apartment complex is called a tower. For example, Fuji Tower. There are 9 towers and 2 are for officers, since enlisted members outnumber officers by a lot. Now, one thing about the military, crap happens. When getting stationed, it is the active duty member's responsibility to either apply for housing on or off base before arriving, depending on what is allowed. If there is limited space, and you don't apply for housing on time, then you get put where there is space. So our new officer got placed in an enlisted tower. Mind you, enlisted members have families of their own, and other officers have been placed in enlisted housing before without an issue. Here are some quotes from his letter. And yes, this guy has a PhD. I have many valid objections to living in a building of almost all enlisted, and even many lower enlisted being an officer. There is a lot of crime, violent actions, drug use, and alcoholism that happens in enlisted housing. There are also sexual assaults and other perverts. I have a good-looking family, a wife, and 2 daughters, aged 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims of these enlisted deviant activities. My family should be safe in housing with officers. Officers are much more respectable, and these types of deviant activities are incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being commonplace. Other officer families will not want to visit us because our family lives in enlisted housing. My children need to make friends with other officer children. My wife needs to make friends with other officers' wives. I need to make friends with other officers. Forcing an officer to live in a large apartment building with almost all enlisted is unethical. You get the idea. This guy basically looks down on all enlisted service members, assuming every single one is a drug user, pervert, pedo, criminal, etc. The kicker, he was an enlisted army member before going to officer school. In civilian terms, think of a manager that discriminates and calls all of his subordinates criminals, violent, alcoholics, pervs, drug users, etc., based on your job position, forgetting that some have a family and, maybe aren't any of those things.
And he not only has the authority to ruin your work life, he can ruin your personal life. Deny days off, make you stay late, write you up if he doesn't like you, and not letting you promote.
Safe to say, everyone was pissed, and I have nothing to lose. I was separating soon and figured I'd have some fun before I get out. I created a burner Facebook account and posted the letter and the officer's picture on a popular military enlisted group page. Within 2 days, it spread like wildfire. But I wasn't done yet. The military has something called challenge coins. Think of trading cards, but custom coins that come in many shapes and sizes. I designed one with his face and a big middle finger on the back. On top of that, I designed stickers to show how proud US deviants are. Other coin designs came from other people as well, but so far I think mine was more popular. I sold over 70 coins to the initial person who originally sent me the picture at a huge discounted price so she can sell them for a profit for herself. So the officer's face is everywhere because most people keep their coins displayed on their desk. No matter where the officer went at work, he would see his face on someone's desk. And since it didn't have his name on the coin, can't officially say it's him. I sold more stateside, and even some got sent to Europe. I made about 3K overall, which was nice. The story even got featured on the online naval newspaper and on 2 popular YouTube channels. And if you're military, you know the only time big military cares is when it's too big to sweep under the rug. This story got the officer sent up to captain's mast, which is like Navy court. He tried to say his wife was the one that wrote the letter, but no one is buying it because her writing style is way worse. She even tried to take the fall, but no one believed her. They both ended up deleting all social media. Due to this, he got served 3 UCMJ articles, which basically are his offenses, but there's more. When you're in the military, you have a deadline on how long you can be a certain rank. If you don't pick up, then you're kicked out. And because he's new and got served UCMJ articles, he won't be up for promotion and therefore was involuntarily separated. Also, the officer program he went through pays for his PhD. When the military pays for your PhD, you have to serve 10 years to pay them back. If you don't complete 10 years, you have to pay the military back with money instead of time. So he lost his job and now has to pay back the military for his PhD, and since it takes a while for the paperwork to have him and his family sent back stateside, you can bet he socially suffered because no one worked with him. The next one is a petty revenge story. I was young, maybe 15 years old or so, and would pick up the odd babysitting gig for extra money. I took a night for a household that was on my paper route. They asked me to be there on a Saturday at 8:30, and I arrived a few minutes early. The parents were still getting ready, and they asked me to watch the kids while they prepared to head out. They left the house at about 9:15. Before they headed out, the wife gave me some very specific instructions. I could have a snack, 2 Oreos on the counter, nothing else. She said she poured a glass of milk for me and left it in the fridge. It was right next to the plastic milk jug with a piece of tape on it showing the level. She told me she'd check it when she got back, and if I took any extra milk, I would have to answer for it. The kids were okay, went to bed without any fuss, and the parents returned home at 12:20. Mommy paid me for 3 hours about 10 minutes after they arrived. Excuse me, but this isn't right. I got here before 8:30, and it's now almost 12:30. That's 4 hours, not 3. We didn't leave until 9:15, and we got home at 12:15. I'm only paying you for 3 hours. But I was watching the kids from 8:30. That doesn't matter. We were home, and you weren't in charge. We were. I took the money and rode my bike home. A couple of weeks later, they did pretty much the same thing. 2 things are important. First, the wife was a neat freak. I'm guessing now she had OCD. Everything was lined up perfectly. One of the kids spilled his drink, and I was looking for some paper towels. The cleaning supplies under the sink were perfectly lined up. Same with the pantry. Every jar and can was in a row with the label facing directly to the front. Second, this was in the mid-1970s, and all canned food had paper labels. So, the third time they called me in to babysit, they were late leaving again, and I knew that I was going to get shortchanged for the time I was there. I was steaming. So I went into the pantry and tore the labels off each and every can, all of them. She had a shelf for Campbell's soups, another for canned veggies, another for canned fruits, and I scrambled the unlabeled cans. When they got home, sure enough, wifey tried to shortchange me. You know what? Keep your money. I don't want it, and I am never babysitting for you again. And as of today, I'm stopping delivering your newspapers as well, so if you want to read the paper, you're going to have to go buy it at a corner store. I stormed out. I wish I could have seen the expression on her face when she opened the pantry door and saw shelf after shelf of bare metal cans. The next one is a malicious compliance story. When I was in university, one class had a weekly assignment, which was a 1-page essay that was mandatory to pass, but only worth 1% of the final mark per weekly essay. So they made up 10% of the total mark in a 10-week semester. Each week, I'd put in a lot of effort, and no matter what, I would get a mark of 9/10, which equates to 0.9% of the 1% mark. This went on for about 6 weeks. I thought it was a little odd that it was always the same mark, and I was frustrated I didn't get full marks because they were basic questions and I answered perfectly, but that's beside the point of the story. Anyway, my record thus far was perfect. I was a model student, never late, perfect work, etc. Now, in week 7, I had a family emergency. I could not complete my essay and asked for a one-day extension. Given my record, I didn't envision an issue with this, but surprisingly, the teacher denied my request and told me that if I didn't submit it, I'd fail the course. Alrighty then. So I dealt with the said emergency, albeit late. I opened my Word document, wrote half a sentence, then typed some gibberish that looked like an error code, and copied and pasted it down the page. Then I uploaded the essay online. You said I needed to submit my essay. Here it is. What I fully expected to happen was that the teacher would contact me and say there was an error uploading my document and to please resubmit it. This would have been the next day since it was late at night when I submitted it, and so I would have time to do it properly, which is what would have happened had she granted me the extension in the first place. What happened instead was I heard nothing. Then I got my grade. 9/10. What I figured out is that my teacher must not have even been reading our essays. She was probably marking us based on our previous assignment grades and just copying and pasting the grade each week. The worst thing is I couldn't report her because that would have meant confessing to submitting an incomplete essay. Needless to say, for the last 3 weeks, I put minimal effort into my essays and lo and behold, continued my streak of 9/10. The next one is an entitled people story. I, 25M, have been working since I was 16, and my first ever job was one I know many people share: McDonald's. Anyone who's worked there, even for the shortest amount of time, undoubtedly has stories, myself included. This one is definitely in my top 3 most ridiculous, and I've been racking my brain trying to figure out which to tell on these subreddits. I was probably about 17 when this happened, and at the time, I was doing opening shifts on weekends. The location I worked in was located just beyond a golf country club that catered to the local retirement community, so every morning we would see the same group of older people, more or less. One regular, we'll call him Ed, I served almost every time I opened the store, and his order was very simple, and one I've never been able to forget because of this: sausage biscuit and at least 8 grape jelly packets. Ed was a big guy. He had a hard time even getting in the door some mornings, as he was always out of breath just making the trip from his car, and I would guess he was only in his mid-60 SS. Otherwise, a very standard older gentleman with the exception of his medical alert bracelet, which I had noticed many times before, as his was particularly elaborate. I didn't really notice when he was gone for a while, if I'm being honest. He wasn't an everyday sort of regular, and we weren't even on conversational terms beyond the customer service script of "Hi, bye, have a good day." However, the next time I saw him, he was in bad enough shape that even I had to ask him if he was all right. He was wheezing just coming up to the counter and coughing whenever he spoke, and I got the gist that he had just been in the hospital. I knew what he wanted, so I just told him I got it and not to worry about saying it, but before he could pay, a woman rushed in from outside and started talking a mile a minute. It's pretty clear she's his wife, and definitely of the trophy variety. Big hair, nice manicure, sparkly jewelry, at least a decade younger, if not more. She's frantic, begging him not to get his breakfast sandwich and pleading with me not to serve him. It's super awkward, and I end up asking my manager what to do, and she says we can't refuse service because someone else says to. So I apologize, and Ed gets his food while his wife is nearly in tears telling me he's had heart issues, I think surgery as well, but I don't recall, and the doctor said he can't have any sort of cholesterol or fast food because his arteries can't take it anymore. All I could really do was apologize and leave it to Ed to try and console her, which he did not. He honestly just sort of ignored her until she went back outside. She came in on her own after that several times, begging us not to serve her husband. I felt for her. It was obvious Ed was killing himself slowly with his lack of regard for his diet, if everything she said was true. Unfortunately, there was nothing we could do, and every time I asked, I was told it wasn't up to us to police the customers' diets. It became increasingly tense serving Ed as he never seemed to improve with his breathing, and eventually he and his wife just stopped coming. The morning crew noticed and hoped he had taken his wife's advice at long last. But no. One morning his wife comes back, alone. She's stone-faced, cold, and before I can greet her, she slams his medical alert bracelet down on the counter and just opens the floodgates on my poor teenage ass. I mean, full-on shouting at me that I had killed her husband. The way she said it was like I had strangled him with my own 2 hands and got some sort of enjoyment out of watching his slow decline. I was pretty stunned and just apologized and handed her over to our manager to escape to the back. No way was I sitting through a whole tirade basically accusing me of first-degree murder. When I came back, my manager was stressed, but the woman had left at last. Apparently, she made all sorts of demands, wanting corporate's number so she could sue us for causing Ed's heart to give out with our food and never even trying to stop him. She was especially pissed at me for refusing to stop serving him and wanted all kinds of information on me, which my manager firmly refused, and her tears and anger made me feel truly culpable. We never saw her again after that for as long as I worked there. As far as I know, nothing came of her lawsuit threats, and I eventually moved on to a different, less customer service-oriented job because I had grown to hate people even more than when I started. To Ed, aka Sausage Biscuit Guy, rest in peace, and I hope there's plenty of grape jelly wherever you ended up. I try to be glad your wife loved you enough to go full Karen over your passing, but now I'm burdened with the small, unshakable fact that I did, however unintentionally, play some part in enabling you to your end. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike! What have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.